Hi, welcome back to Tech Careers Japan. And today we have Taylor from Wahl+Case. Taylor, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Taylor. I'm a senior community specialist with Wahl+Case, and I help engineers find jobs in Japan.
So, Taylor, what is Fullstack Engineer?
Okay, so a full stack engineer refers to somebody who can basically do programming on both the front end side or like the client side of the web application or mobile application, as well as a back end development. So you can think of front end development as everything that you do see in the website, and back end development is everything that makes the website work the way you want it to. And a lot of engineers will focus on one side or the other because there's a lot of different like small things about each side. So full stack engineer is somebody who is strong in both sides and can handle tasks on both sides.
Okay, so would you say like those people like can do everything is a full stack engineer?
Yeah, I mean they can do a little bit of everything, I would say. Maybe some people specialize more in like backend. Like backend is kind of what they're good at, but they can handle some development projects on front end. Or maybe they're front end engineers that understand a lot of like, back-end concepts and can help out the back-end focused engineers when they have to. But there are a lot of people, especially I think once you get to a senior level as an engineer, there are a lot of people that are comfortable with both. Yeah.
So what are the key responsibilities for full stack engineers in Japan?
Yeah, so I mean it's the same for the most part of like any kind of engineer. You're of course doing development. It really depends on the team and the needs of the team. Sometimes if the whole engineering department is small, you're doing testing and maybe even helping out like with the design implementation. But I think a lot of full stack engineers, they tend to help out in the development tasks where they're best at. So if they've got more experience in this kind of programming, then they'll mostly focus on those tasks. Or they're one of the people on the team that can help out whenever there's, whenever a project needs an extra person.
It sounds like they have a lot of opportunities to work on like different engineers.
Oh yeah, certainly. I think a lot of people, once you start doing full stack development, or once you get really comfortable with, if you're doing front end development or back end development, I think people start to get bored, and so it's more interesting. I've talked to a lot of I've talked to a lot of full stack engineers that are like, I would be bored if I could only do one. So that's a benefit, I would say.
Okay. Thank you very much. So what's technical skills are essential for full stack engineers in Japan?
Yeah, so starting from front end development, like pretty much all modern front end development, especially if you're talking about web development, is done in JavaScript. So you've got to know JavaScript. I maybe also recommended if you pick up like one of the modern JavaScript frameworks that companies often use. I know React and Vue get talked about a lot, but at least if you can do JavaScript, that's going to be really important. And then on backend, I want to say like the most popular backend languages are Java, Ruby on Rails, and Python. Like I would say most companies are using one of those. So if you're familiar with one or multiple of those, you're pretty much confident to work somewhere or to pick up a new tech stack if you have to. Golang, I also want to mention Golang because Golang is getting a lot more popular here. PHP used to be very popular, so there's still a lot of legacy systems built in PHP on back end. But like nobody's using PHP for modern front-end development. Not a lot of companies are still using it on back end either. So I think that's where more companies are adopting Golang because Golang seems to sit on top of PHP really well, or they integrate. Wow. So those are like the technical skills that I think you're pretty solid if you can get into one of those. Now, depending on the industry, I also want to mention C#.net, because a lot of companies do use C#.net, but I think from the web developers I've talked to, usually web developers don't use C#.net, which is for backend development, usually for web development. I think you can use C#.net full stack too, but that's usually for desktop development. So you can use that language, but for modern web development, not very many companies use that. It's a little more specific.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any specific or certification or qualification for like typically valid in Japan for full stack engineer?
Yeah, I mean, so as a full stack engineer, you're expected to handle everything, be able to handle anything across the stack. So, you know, there are some really common like tools that are being used these days, like Docker. You know, if you want to talk about containerization technology and like Kubernetes, you can also get certificates in like concepts like distributed systems or microservices architecture. Like those are all like kind of hot like tools or techniques or you know, types of systems that are getting really popular and that clients are asking for people with that experience. So like if you want to get more experience in backend development, like those are some areas you can get into. Also for web development, you're pretty much going to need to know about public cloud platforms and like integrating into public cloud platform. So if you want to take an AWS certification or a GC or AWS like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform, those are being used really frequently. Azure, Microsoft Azure is also okay. Those are like the three kind of big cloud platforms that you kind of need to have experience in. And then on the front end side of things, actually, you should have some sort of understanding of how design works and like how UI UX design kind of works into the whole process. So like if you want to get stronger in front end, then maybe taking like UI UX design courses can actually really help you be able to talk to designers and understand like the limitations of design versus what you can actually create on front end. Also, like it's silly, but HTML, CSS is actually really important if you're a front end engineer. And you need to be able to work closely with the design team because a lot of really small changes made on the front end, like client side application, are done in HTML, CSS. And sometimes I talk to like full stack developers that are like, yeah, I can do front end, but I can't do HTML, CSS. I can't make it perfect. I need as a designer to come in. So that's also something you can consider, like if you want to get better at front end or you want to specialize in front end as like a full stack engineer.
Sounds difficult job.
Yeah, I mean, I have talked to people who are like front end engineers are like, I want to get better at back end and be a full stack engineer, but like it's so hard. I can't wrap my head around it. Or backend same deal. Backend engineers that are like, I can't design anything. I can code in JavaScript, but I can't make anything look good. So I really do think a lot of times people start off as backend engineer or full stack or front end engineer, and they kind of work their way towards the middle as they get comfortable in what they already know.
Okay. Then, so how can someone start their career as full stack engineer in Japan?
Yeah. So yeah, I do recommend like you can always start and specialize in one side or the other, specialize in front end development or specialize in back end development and kind of learn new tasks as you go along. I think a lot of people become full stack by working on a full stack development team. So like some companies will split, you know, the development. All of the back end development is going to go to one team of engineers with a manager, all of the front end to another manager. But I think when you work on a full stack team, that's where you can start to raise your hand for projects that maybe you're not as comfortable with. And then you also get to usually, you get to work with a more senior engineer who can then actually teach you like what the best practice is and can review your code and stuff like that. Also, like if you're really struggling, you can always take a coding boot camp. But coding boot camp is usually best for people that don't have a computer science degree.
Okay.
That's actually like if you want, especially if you're not a developer yet and you just want to become a developer who's working in Japan, getting a degree in computer science or information sciences, sometimes even like we see like physics, mathematics people come through. Having that kind of education background is going to be really important for when you go on to be a developer and then you're working on much more complex tasks.
So you kind of mentioned like before, but like what do you think the career opportunities for full stack engineers in Japan? Like, potential career growth opportunities?
I mean, anybody who is working in a more senior position on the technical side of the product is going to have full stack knowledge. Even if they're not good at one side of the stack versus the other side, pretty much everyone is going to have at least knowledge of everything that goes on. So like engineering manager or team lead are very obvious like direction to go in. Product manager is actually really important too. Some companies are looking for product managers with really really strong knowledge of back-end systems and how they operate in order to actually deliver product features. Like that's really important to the whole product life cycle. Some of them need product managers who understand design really well and can work really well with designers. So like, I mean, if you're a full stack engineer and want to be a product manager and like, if you're comfortable on both sides of that, I think, your career opportunities open up.
Wow, interesting. Okay, then, so what's the common task for the full stack engineer, like on a daily basis?
Oh yeah, what they'd be doing on a daily basis. It's definitely like development every day. As a part of development, you're often doing like code review. You're doing, maybe doing testing. Implementation, either into like testing environment or actually, implementing the finished product. If a lot of companies are doing agile these days, so you'd probably be doing an agile sprints. Typically every 2 weeks, you're getting together as a team and like reviewing what you've done and planning what you're going to do next. Sometimes, depending on how big your team is, a lot of cross-functional communication with, if you're not doing testing yourself, well, then you have to talk to the testing team. If you don't have a project manager, like an engineering manager who's handling the project management, then you have to talk to the project management team or the product management team. Sometimes you even have to talk to like business stakeholders too, though. This all depends on like the size of the company and like what the needs of the product actually are, I would say.
Thank you. So you kind of mentioned this one too, but can you recommend any like program or training for like course that would be good for full stack engineers? Oh
yeah, definitely. So I would say like I do get to talk to on the front end side of things. I get to talk with a lot of front end engineers that started as designers. They're like graphic designers or they were UI UX designers, and for whatever reason they started to do more development. They realized they like development, and now they're front end developers. I think doing a coding boot camp in that case, where you probably don't have the same computer science fundamentals as somebody who's taking a more traditional engineering path, that coding boot camp is really great because it will teach you the fundamentals, like Code Chrysalis or Lowagon. They're teaching you full stack. So a lot of places will do like React and JavaScript on front end and Ruby on Rails on back end. And so, you get to maybe have a little more structured introduction to front end, and then you also get to learn back end and how front end implements into back end, which is also something that is actually really important for front end engineers to know. So that I highly recommend. If you've already got computer science background, let's say you're like maybe a back end focused full stack engineer, like again picking up some sort of like design certification can be really helpful for when you need to talk with those teams. Or if you want to grow like your knowledge of like the whole software development life cycle, you can do stuff about like cloud architecture. I would say that once you start to get to more any senior position, that tends to be really important to have knowledge about.
Okay. So what's the typical salary range for full stack engineers in Japan?
Yeah. So I would say if you're looking at like a mid-level engineer, typically you're looking at anywhere from 6 million yen per year to 8 million yen per year. Once you get above 8 million yen, like 8.5, 9 million, 10 million, that tends to be a senior level engineer salary, like an individual contributor salary. And then, I mean, these days in the market, there are companies that pay like 11, 12, 13 million yen even to individual contributors, but that's definitely at the top of the market. And it's definitely more common for that to be like a team lead salary or an engineering manager salary, something like that.
Okay, thank you very much for explaining. So let me ask about like their Japanese language skill. Like, what do you think? Like, how important is Japanese language proficiency for full stack engineers in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, like you can get a job without speaking any Japanese, but I think if you if you want a lot more opportunities and you want to increase your salary, the engineers that I see that are getting paid at the top of the market speak Japanese. That's because more and more companies like they can support English only speaking engineers, but if they have a full team of engineers that only speak English, now they need more people who can sit in on the Japanese like business meetings and be able to report back what the findings are, or they can talk to the design team or the marketing team. So I think it's not the most important thing, but it can open a lot of doors for you. And there are even some people that have like really strong Japanese skills, but maybe a lower technical skill, or like they don't have a technical background at all and they want to break into the industry. Those people are starting to get more and more jobs because they have that Japanese language skill. And that's so important.
So would you say like there's opportunities for non-Japanese speaking full stack engineers to succeed as a full stack engineer in Japan still?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that we talk to people like that all the time. I on the most extreme version, like I've heard of people getting hired at like major Japanese companies that into teams that didn't speak any English, and they were just using Google Translate. And that was because they had like graduated from a really good university, they had really strong tech skills. That was not ideal for them, obviously. I think it's more common that Japanese companies are making these English-speaking engineering teams, or a lot of the stakeholders are bilingual, so they can support people that can't have a technical conversation in Japanese. I will say that there are more companies than you would think that are looking for people with at least conversational Japanese. Like, you don't have to do an interview in Japanese. You don't have to be able to pass an interview. You don't have to talk, really strongly with business side in Japanese. But like, if you can do like a little bit of like broken Japanese, that a lot of companies will say yes or no based on if you can like get at least to that level of Japanese, like very conversational, not business level. So that's also something I'm like, even if, you know, you're not confident in Japanese, you're not confident in language learning, if you can learn a little bit of conversation, it'll really help you, even if you're only speaking English in your like technical work.
So besides Japanese, I mean, you can include Japanese too. Like, what are some common challenges for like full stack engineers facing working in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that they're two different sides of they're two different skill sets. They're both programming, but like front end development fundamentals are just a little bit different than what you expected to do on back end development. And so even if like you're a back end engineer and you know Java, so you can kind of pick up some Scala and you can kind of pick up, I don't know, C, like languages that have a little bit of similarity. Like you have to kind of learn a new way to think as a programmer once you start doing front end development and vice versa, of course. So like it's just a matter of learning the new side of things and like what the best practices are for that kind of development.
So like what trends or changes like should like aspiring full stack engineers like be aware of? What would you say?
So one, I would definitely say, I mean, I talk about web development a lot so far, but I would say most full stack engineers have like so much more job opportunities if they're doing web development. So like not really desktop development, not like GUI, like graphic user interface development for like construction companies or anything like that. Web development is really, really big right now in Japan. You know, web or mobile too. So that's a big one. I'd also say Japanese language is like kind of a contributor in a lot of companies, whether or not they'll hire you. I've talked to, it's really sad because I have talked to a lot of really competent, really experienced engineers these days that I asked them, you know, where they're interviewing, or if they failed an interview, I asked what was the feedback? Why did you fail the interview? And they say they just told me they needed more Japanese, which I think is kind of code for there was another candidate that spoke more Japanese that got the job. And it's too bad because I mean it, like these guys are really good. They're going to find a job eventually in Japan. But that can be a deciding factor sometimes. Yeah. It's just going to take more time if you don't speak Japanese these days.
Thank you very much. So I think that's all we have.
Awesome.
Thank you again for joining us today.
No, thank you, Aki. It was a pleasure. Hope I didn't talk too much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.